Hi, and welcome to episode 6 of Differential Diagnosis, where we're differentially diagnosing every single House M.D. episode. We're about 1% of the way through at this point, but we're slowly getting there. And my name is Harvey, and today I'm hosting along with my other host, Gaz.
You still haven't got the dynamic of who really is in control of this podcast, but because you kind of said also hosting with a degree of resentment, I found like a degree of anger or frustration that you have to dialogue with someone over this or call them a colleague. I don't know what to think about that.
Well, I thought a House MD podcast where I'm just talking to myself about House MD episodes would be too depressing for me to continue on.
It'd be, in my opinion, the highest degree of performance art. But you've decided to take this to the next level and turn it into some infotainment.
That's true. I should... Okay, I'm co-hosting and Gaz is also co-hosting.
Thank you very much.
How's that? There we go.
Glad to be here.
Everyone's happy. But we're still splitting everything 70-30.
Oh, yeah.
All of those non-profits. So, today, we are looking at episode 7, Fidelity. A little synopsis for this episode. After returning from jogging with his best friend, Ed, played by the guy from Prison Break...
Not the guy from Prison Break, the brother of the guy from Prison Break.
The original imprisoned brother. He is uncharacteristically abused by his bedridden wife. House concludes that she either has rabbit fever from cooking rabbits or African sleeping sickness, which must have been sexually transmitted. Oh my God, what's going to happen?
Wow.
So, hey, what an interesting setup. I bet you're ready to listen to another 40 minutes of us talking about it, or however long it lasts.
I'd just like to note that synopsis was powered by fandom.wiki. It's probably not even the right URL, but it's powered by fandom, by House M.D. fandom.
Well, yes, so we haven't reiterated the setup of what we do recently, so pretty much we would always suggest watching the episode beforehand, unless you have an incredible photographic memory. We try to explain what we're talking about and the context of it, but sometimes we don't, and we might use the word he and miss out the noun of the person we're talking about. So, if you want to be really up to date, just watch the series along with us. It's a great reason to watch House MD. And also, we're watching the episode along, and then we edit out all of the, boring bits. So basically we have a chronological chat about the episode, but then we try and edit it down into an actual grander chat about the show. And I think that's pretty much how the podcast functions, just in case you needed some context for how we do things.
You're giving away the secret sauce. It's like KFC, giving away the herbs and spices mix.
I know.
For free. Now everyone's going to be making a House MD podcast.
I know. People don't understand they could do it if they wanted, but we got there first. Google it; it doesn't exist. but hey, let's talk about some House MD. Just a note on what platform we're watching it on. We're watching the show on Amazon Prime, which recently brought the House MD episodes back to Prime subscribers, of which we were already subscribers.
By the way, we're not paid by Amazon to say that. That's just something that happened.
I would like to be paid by Amazon to say that, though. So if anyone from Amazon is listening, I'll happily shell out your platform. But yeah, so the episode starts just cold open. The setup's very simple, as we said in the synopsis. It starts with two friends jogging. They're kind of talking about their relationships. We don't know whether or not there's a hint of a problem with one of the married man's relationships there. That would be the brother from Prison Break.
It's
I'm not
that
sure if
bloke
this is a
from Prison Break.
I'm not sure if this is a prequel to Prison Break.
I, man, they changed the casting on the other brother, that's for sure. But also, it tried to do a bit of a rope-a-dope there because it was basically saying, oh, he's not very well. He's got a headache. Oh, he's looking dehydrated. Maybe he's really ill.
Yeah, they do. They do often do that. And they do it more and more. But this is, as you say, this is one of the first times that the apparently ill person isn't the ill person. The person that is ill is his wife, who's been in bed for 3 days, and for some reason, no one's taken her to the hospital.
It's expensive.
So
It is the United States.
Just let her rot at home.
Oh, you sleep it off for 3 days.
I do like though this intro is really funny because he gets into the house and his wife has been bedridden for 3 days.
He still thinks
and
she's
yet,
going to be up and doing stuff.
Yeah, but he also wanders in, opens the fridge, and just says, "Hey, where's some drinks? I'm dehydrated." And it's like, I don't think that's what I mean, if my girlfriend's ill, I don't like run around and go, "Hey, where's the milk?" Like solve it myself.
Have you gone to the shop? I need some milk. Oh, you've been bedridden for 3 days. That explains a lot. I've been doing all the shopping for the past 3 days.
Well, the wife then does do something. She doesn't get him a drink, but she just punch him in the face.
She basically said, "What did Four Fingers say to the face? Slap."
And that's what sets it off. She's tired. She's getting all abusive. Better take her to the hospital now that it's becoming a problem for me.
That is pretty weird, isn't it? That's a weird setup.
It's a very strange setup. So this is another episode as well where Cameron has now brought 2 cases to House, and this is an episode where Cameron is interested by the case and sort of, plays on House's, need to be interested in order to get him to take the case. But it's very interesting that Cameron is the one bringing a lot of cases to House. And the last time she did it, which I believe was in episode 2, was because she felt sorry for the family who was asking for their help. But in this one, I'm not so sure that's it. It seems like Cameron is genuinely interested by it, which is a new facet of it's a new facet of her personality.
Yes. Well, it's a new facet we're being introduced to.
True. Or they just got scared and just started writing extra character traits. But hey, you can't tell. That's all that matters.
That's all that matters. There's also always this kind of weird combativeness between Cameron and House. It's like always she's trying to get a rise out of him. I always thought I interpreted the birthday thing in the previous episode. If you haven't watched that previous episode yet, she kind of finds out that it's House's birthday and he gets a bit weird about it. But I always think she's always trying to get a rise out of him. Sometimes, and sometimes she's not. She's trying to probe him and jolt him and prod him.
Yeah, well, she's trying to fix him, which certainly turns up later on. But she's very. I don't necessarily think she's trying to get a rise, but I think she does because she doesn't leave things alone. I think it's because she wants him to be a better person, and he just wants her to shut up and do her job.
But trying to improve him takes away from the quintessential thing that makes him unique.
Well, that's certainly what House would think as well, which we talked slightly about last episode about House's kind of ego and his idea of himself and how that might be affecting, he might not be quite as rational and happy as he appears. Anybody who's watched the whole series will know that those things come out. But for now, it's just coming out that maybe House is a little bit of an egomaniac in that sense. He kind of likes the idea of himself more than his actual life choices.
And here we have a weirdly questionable and maybe slightly misogynistic clinic case where House is, well, it speaks for itself, doesn't it? A woman with very large breasts catches House's attention.
Yeah, this is because a woman is suffering from shortness of breath, and she comes to the hospital, and House kind of suspects it's her it's her recent breast implants that are causing it, and he brings in Wilson for a consult in which they
Yeah.
basically just stare at a woman's breasts, and she's clearly quite uncomfortable. I think the scene has aged very badly. I'm not sure that you would
That
necessarily
is
do this now.
that's precisely why I said it was interesting. This is not aged well.
Yeah, I think like it works within the context of it. I don't think it's like, I don't know. I think if she wasn't so uncomfortable, that it would be less weird. But I mean, because it's a thing that House would do, and that Wilson might politely do, would just be to stare at the have an opportunity to stare at these women's breasts. But it's a very weird scene now, watching it in like light of I think how I guess it's 15 years later, like our culture's changed, and it's
Yeah.
very funny to see like things that you think are modern, how like there's little elements of them which you just don't see anymore.
No.
And whether or not that's a good or bad thing, who knows? But it's interesting to see the change nonetheless, looking back.
Yeah. I mean, it's like if you're watching TV in the early 2000s and then you watch the repeat of Bergerac, you think, oh, that hasn't aged well. He's in a speedboat whacking some guy from the Rotary Club while absolutely drunk or something. So, yeah, drink driving is not really an accepted norm these days. So,
No,
that's like a kind of example that's drawn from a real life example, but with fictional circumstances that I've imputed on it. But that's kind of what I was driving at.
no,
There's a kind of
I totally know what you
relativism
mean.
to it.
Well, this episode has a theme as well. I mean, it's called Fidelity. Usually, the name of the episode is a good place to look if you want to find the theme. This has this is a very similar. This is that theme is in this episode. We start off with um, we have a husband and wife part coupling who may be having some marriage issues. We're not entirely sure. We then have Wilson. House notices that he's wearing nice ties and looking very nice, and he wonders if he's trying to impress someone who isn't his wife. And we know based on the episode Maternity, we know that Wilson weirdly invited himself to House's house. That's getting a very
House
annoying
is
phrase to
home.
say. House's home for Christmas dinner without his wife. So we know that Wilson is having some kind of marriage problem. So it's quite nice to see those previous threads coming back in later
Y-
episodes when a theme that is relevant to them is being explored.
Yeah. It wasn't just like shoehorned in. This is the Wilson marriage episode. We have to get this down. They found a good place to put it. And also
Mm.
you find in the clinic, the clinic, the clinic case this time round is about relationships as well and fidelity, as it were.
Yeah, well, the clinic. I mean, let's just talk about the clinic scene, because the clinic scene is the clinic this time. The clinic storyline is one patient once again, which the show often does when it wants to use the clinics as a thematic tool rather than just a couple of funny skits.
Yeah.
Um, which is quite nice the way that they maneuver the clinic to either be relevant to the episode or just like a nice little break from the case.
Yeah.
So this so the clinic the clinic storyline is woman comes in with big breasts. It's the apparent reason for her breathing difficulties, but to cover his tracks and to annoy Cuddy, House just organizes a bunch of other tests, and then from those other tests he actually finds out that the wife's husband is drugging her with his blood pressure medication in order to seemingly not make her want to sleep with him, which is interesting because she just got those breast implants in order to make him want to sleep with her,
Yeah.
which
And
seems like a very strange thing to do. So go on, Gaz, give me your thoughts on that storyline.
and the other thing about it is that his blood pressure tablets are making his libido low, which is why
Mm.
he doesn't want to sleep with her and wants to stop her from making him sleep with him or kind of nagging about it. So he's basically doping her up with beta blockers.
Yeah, whereas the Wilson storyline deals with him possibly flirting with someone, which is fidelity, but nothing's happening. and then the main storyline focuses on one of the patients has been having an affair.
Yeah.
So there's kind of like they take the fidelity idea of couples having sex with other people and how devastating that is for people, and then they twist it in lots of ways. They have the temptation of it in Wilson's case. They have the like weird avoidance techniques of how to prevent your partner from sleeping with other people, which is drugging them against their will.
Yep.
And then you have the post effects in the main case, which is somebody has had an affair. How are they going to deal with that? And how are they going to rebuild their trust?
Yeah. And also, it comes back to the biggest theme in all of House: deception, lying.
Everybody lies.
And that, in my opinion, is the big thing about it. It's everyone's lying to each other or withholding things from people that are obstructing the way towards a solution.
Yeah.
In the case of the clinic, it's the fact that a husband can't be truthful to his wife about the issues that he has. In the main case, it's a matter of basically her not being able to tell, the patient being able to tell her husband that she's had an affair, because she still loves him but had this affair and kind of starts regretting it. And Cameron for not telling House her conflicts of interest in this case. But he finds out. He always finds out.
Well, there is the Cameron backstory, which I don't know if we should discuss now, because it was brought up in maternity that she had a backstory. She was having trouble communicating with patients.
Yes.
House actually then goes on to refer back to that, and he stops her from talking to the patients and telling them bad news because he says, "You are incapable of doing it. You have some problems." But so yeah, Gaz, tell us what we learn about Cameron's backstory. We finally get some weight to it.
Yeah, she's been married. She's tied the knot before, but to a person who was dying of cancer. And is it cancer? Yeah, it's cancer. And she did it. And her motives for doing that aren't as clear as they seem, because at first it seemed as though it was because of the fact that they got married and then he got cancer. But
she frames it like that, and then House reads between the lines.
Yeah,
because he's a doctor.
Because he's House and he's good at reading between the lines. And basically, she married him while he had cancer. It was this whole complex again of trying to fix people that keeps cropping up in Cameron's backstory, and also comes to the fore. But what I like about this episode in particular is that it seems you start realizing there are all these like complications with the patient, and you feel like instinctively it has to be something to do with her cheating.
Yeah.
But we have to go. The characters have to go through this process of finding that out. Your instinct says she cheats in some way because of the way the patient approaches things. But you have to wait for the process of elimination until we get to that point for the characters then to come into their own and then engage with the subject matter.
That's what's quite nice about this episode, in that I think within about 15 minutes they've got it down to two things. I think House just suggests African sleeping sickness because he thinks that's what it is, even though it's very unlikely. And then there's rabbit sickness. And I believe both of African sleeping sickness is the only one which can be sexually transmitted. So they very quickly put her on, neither of the couple admit to cheating. They refuse to admit to it. And so they then put her on the rabbit treatment, and very quickly it doesn't work. So it's obvious that she has the African sleeping sickness. And then there's quite an interesting, ethical dilemma in which, because the husband is the only person who's conscious, he has to make the decision to treat for the African sleeping sickness. And because of that, he then has to make that decision. Does he think that his wife has had an affair? And yeah, so but as you say, like the entire thing is this weird whodunit where it's these two people basically saying, I haven't done anything wrong. And their motivations for why they would lie about infidelity are very strange,
Yeah.
but they make sense. The wife is basically would say she'd rather die than admit cheating. And if it's the husband who's cheated, he's basically saying, I'd rather my wife died than admit
Yeah.
cheating, in which case he's effectively murdering her. So there's two very interesting outcomes to that. And but it's nice that eventually it rests on the husband to make that call. But there's this
Yeah.
basically it's a big who done it, who cheated. It's not really a medical like problem after the first 15 minutes of the episode.
Yeah.
The rest of it is just who did the bad thing. And it's there's a big focus on patient drama in this one.
Yes.
I don't have any screen time data, but there's so much interaction with the patients, and there's a patient storyline going on here that's really meaty. It's not just like in maternity where it's like, oh, our baby will die, or like in Occam's Razor where it's like, oh, our son might die. This is like, it's the consequences, someone will die, but there's a bigger kind of ethical question of, are you willing to die for the lies that you want to keep?
Yeah.
And there's clearly, and we learn more about this marriage and like the problems that they've had. And I think they probably could have gone further with that. There aren't a lot of scenes with the husband and wife interacting and learning about their relationship, but through them communicating with the doctors, we do learn about the relationship enough where that kind of infidelity whodunit is engaging. And it's a nice direction for the show to go in, not focusing on the medicine so much.
Yeah. The medicine becomes a means to an end in this episode.
Yeah.
But I think the ethical dilemma is just really, 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 really well written, really well articulated. And it's really interesting because we don't know who's lied, but one of them definitely does. So by the time they've got by the time they get to the African sleeping sickness, the husband must have already surmised that she had cheated.
Yeah.
And so from his perspective, it's a very easy decision. Him saying yes to that treatment is an admission that she's cheated, and therefore the breakdown of their relationship. But for the audience, it doesn't seem that way because he's still in that whodunit mode.
Yeah. There's something quite interesting about, because there's this idea of trust, and the couple keeps saying, I trust this other person. And as you say, like the episode is constructed so that slowly they never, when they say it's either rabbit sickness or the African sleeping sickness, there's never any doubt that it's not one of those two. The show like funnels itself into it. It has to be one of these. And therefore by saying, oh, it's not the like rabbit sickness and then moving on, they kind of whittle it down to the point where in the end this guy just has to say, I don't know if I trust this woman anymore. And it's quite interesting to see that, because trust is fundamentally just assuming you basically just give someone the benefit of the doubt that they are doing things that you ask of them or they're being a good person when you're not around.
Yeah.
And it's just quite interesting seeing, as you say, from thinking from his end, just how horrific that is, where just House disproves that they should be trusting each other with just like logic, which is really depressing.
Yeah.
But it makes for a very good patient story.
Yes, it does. And as it all progresses, we get into the more kind of central characters get involved. So Cameron gets involved with that, and we'll delve into that when we get into that part of the episode. Another interesting part is how House is starting to dissect Wilson's marital issues, and that's quite fun and entertaining.
Yeah, well, Wilson kind of, this is quite interesting. He it turns out that he's taken a nurse out for lunch, and it's this. Yeah, he wears a nice tie the first day, then he starts wearing nice shoes, And House kind of points out that this is going to be a slippery slope. And while Wilson trusts himself not to do anything, it's quite nice that it's quite nice the show established his marital problems before, but now the show is, establishing this, and we know that this is going to come up in future episodes. But it's quite nice that the show is kind of, I know it's very serialized and it's very split into episodes, but it's nice that the show is starting to kind of feed in these long-term storylines.
Yeah.
And it's, yeah, I mean, the way House like referred back to Cameron's issues in maternity with talking to parents, like it's nice that the show is taking a break from that and saying, look, this isn't just episode to episode, nothing changes. Like, there are going to be long-term storylines and you should pay attention to the details. And that's kind of the funny thing about the Wilson one, as you say, he's dissecting it, and it's also like, Wilson's going to have an affair. It's going to happen. But you get to see someone just going, I trust myself to not make a bad decision. I just want to look nice. It's very nice the way the show's doing that in a quite horrible and cynical way.
Well, yeah, it's like watching a crash in slow motion, a car crash in slow motion. We know what's going to happen. House knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Wilson's the one that's in denial. I guess you could call it Wilson's disease.
Oh.
In reference to last episode.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a terrible...
But instead of storing up too much copper, he's storing up too much cum. He needs to release it.
I was going to go with too much denial, but Jesus Christ, you took it to another level.
That's true, shit.
That's put us on the, what is it, like, restricted list?
Oh,
We've
no,
got
that's
adult
not
themes
explicit.
now.
I don't think so. It's not adult. That's just
Cum.
normal. That's just normal conversation.
Normal conversation.
Children don't listen to this.
Maybe.
Children aren't watching House M.D.
We're probably turning off vast swathes of prospective doctors that could cure all sorts of diseases because of your vulgar language. Unbelievable.
It's quite funny watching this episode. If you've listened to the last episode of the podcast, we were talking about the Socratic method, which we identified as an incredibly deep episode in terms of its like thickness of the way that the like patient drama, the themes of the episode, and the medicine all coagulate to form like a really dense thematic episode where kind of everything comes together. And this is a fresh episode. It's very different, but it's quite funny that this episode isn't about the medicine. It's just about this fundamental like exploration of infidelity through the patient story. And so it's quite weird. This episode is kind of like, eating at the last episode was eating at like a really, a really fancy restaurant where the flavors are really like complex and you have a lot to think about. And then this episode is just like eating a McDonald's. It's just good, but there's not necessarily a lot here, like in terms of exploration, do you think? Which is nice. I mean, it's still a fantastic, funny episode, but in terms of it's about infidelity, there's a story about infidelity with the patients. Other aspects of the characters are revealed, but it's nowhere near as complex as the Socratic method, which is a good thing, I guess, because it gives us a bit of breathing space.
You've used the analogy of like a delicious, like a 3 Michelin star restaurant compared to a McDonald's. I was just going to say, this is your meat and potatoes house.
Yeah.
Previous episode was like filet mignon house. A prime
I don't
cut
have a problem
of
with
steak.
McDonald's.
I
Just
don't
to
know. I just
clarify.
thought I would just elevate the metaphor. I guess I would say, to put it more in to structure it a little bit more, these episodes have a similar mode of composition. They both have themes and sub-themes and A plots and B plots like most intelligent TV shows do. But in the previous episode, it was kind of fugue-like. So you had like a central theme that ran all the way through, and then you had variations on that theme being played through simultaneously, and they all come together in harmony with each other. And in the previous episode, in the Socratic method, he had like 5 or 6 themes going harmoniously together, and so there's a lot to unpick. This one, there's like 2.
Yeah.
Basically, Cameron's issue with relationships, and then the whole concept of fidelity is explored through the patient and her husband. And you could say like a minute variation on that theme was is the clinic case as well. So really 3 themes, whereas in the other one is like 5 or 6. A lot more to unpick. So yeah, it's much less complex, but it's using the same model of plot building, of building this plot is the same, just more simplified and more clarified.
You're right. The complexity of the writing's still there. I didn't want to, as you say, I think they've nailed down running multiple plots at the same time, which wasn't present in the earlier episodes as much.
Yeah.
But I agree. At no point would I say, yeah, I think the the food analogy makes it sound like this was a bland episode, which it's not. But as you say, like just the focus is so much more just easy. It's more human. It's about relationships rather than like a thought process.
Like less heady.
Yeah. Which is absolutely fine. I mean, it's that's the thing. I mean, it's a very funny episode. Like House has some great moments in it, but I think talking about funniness is really difficult to like analyze because we can just. I mean, pretty much any time the writers want to make you laugh, they do. So it's quite hard to say that was a funny scene. Let's talk about it because I mean, it's just they're just jokes.
They're just gags.
Yeah, exactly. They're just gags, and there's no real like. There's nothing to really analyze about them other than, I mean, they're just extra things which make the show extremely watchable and charming.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think charming's the operative word. They're not things you just linger on for ages and then create a dank meme about them. They're things that just pass through in the dialogue that's already quite clever and well constructed. So at the moment, we're in crisis moment because she's in a coma.
She's in the coma, and now he has to make that decision about did she cheat or not. And he doesn't really have much of an option, really. It's either that he waits around and hopes she wakes up, or he just says, maybe she did have an affair. I don't know. Because they're basically telling him that she definitely has African sleeping sickness. So...
Yeah. What I also want to just concentrate on for a moment is that House uses the walk and talk very, very well. I just wanted to pay tribute to that because walk and talk is very, very crucial to this series because it's when they're walking and talking, it's dynamic, there's a lot going on, and they're going through the plot and they're trying to figure out the solutions that then bridge onto the set pieces. And they do it really well. And obviously they've looked at like the West Wing, where the walk and talk stuff happens a lot, kind of put it in there really well. I'd just like to say thanks for doing that.
Yeah, and they even have a self-referential joke about the walk and talk, where they walk round a room. They walk around a hallway and end up back at House's office, which they left, and Wilson's confused about that. And House just says, I just like to walk. Like help my leg. It's quite funny that they actually have a reason to do the walk and talk. It's that House's leg hurts and he wanders around because he's just like can't sit down and focus. But I do get the sense that whenever the writers in for House are really good at telling information, like simple information in really interesting ways. Like for instance, there's the scene where House breaks to the husband that his wife might be cheating. Like the husband wanders in on House kind of pretending to do a medical check on her.
Yeah.
And then he basically says, I'm just checking her for no reason. You and I know exactly what the problem is and what needs to be done. And there's lots of, like, the way they set up scenes and even with the walk and talk, the way that they just even have conversations while wandering around. Just the way the information is told is just so much more engaging than a lot of shows. Because I can imagine House easily just being people sitting in chairs and talking.
Yeah, it could have, and sometimes they do that, but And that's not a bad thing. That's just breaking up the. You wouldn't want it to become a cliche that they just walk around and talk about everything all the time.
Mm.
But especially when you're dealing with like the kind of more Socratic elements where they're trying to break down a disease and try and figure out the solution. Um, but the walk and talks are always kind of bridges to the set pieces, which is really good. It's like something they don't let go of, because you could easily just have a walk and talk and then go on to something completely unrelated. But they're used as kind of thematic bridges between, well, not plot bridges, where it gets you from one plot point to the next fairly easy and in a very dynamic way. It literally walks you through to the next point of the plot.
Yeah.
Another
The
thing,
show,
yeah. Sorry.
the show has a focus on being like entertaining and fun. I don't mean fun in a kind of flippant, silly way. I mean fun as in, like, it just wants your engagement at all times. And it's just like the fact they have that underlying philosophy. Like, they're not, they know that the kind of show they're making, they want to make it as clever as possible within that format. But, at no point are they saying this is like high art. We want like a slow 10-minute burning scene. They're like, each scene has to be, I get the feeling that there's an unwritten rule that each scene has to be a certain length and a certain amount of movement. And it's
Yeah.
quite nice that they're following those rules, and they're not just saying, they're not like blowing off the audience saying, hey, we've just got to have this scene, you've just got to watch this. I think at all points they seem to be very concerned with how much enjoyment the audience is getting.
And also how much momentum that the plot has.
Yeah.
If in a medical procedural, you want the plot to be moving along as quickly as the case is being resolved.
Yeah.
And having that pacing there is really good. I mean, if you're making like a indie movie, maybe you might want to dispense with that or whatever. But in this format, it works really well, and they've obviously know this rule. They know the rules of the game really well, these writers and directors that do these scenes, and obviously David Shaw does, and as a executive producer, he probably would be, and the showrunner, he'd be on top of that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a very interesting moment with Cameron as well, which feeds into her then telling House about her previous marriage to the terminally ill man, in that she's been a very vocal patient. She's been a very focal carer. She's been, if there was ever been a problem when she slipped into a coma, or if there was a treatment to be given, Cameron's there, like, with the couple. And Cameron is clearly seeing some kind of like similarities between this husband waiting on his dying wife and her waiting on her dying husband in the past. And there's a moment where the husband is like doubting her or saying, oh, I can't forgive her for cheating on me. And Cameron eventually just like very uncharacteristically says, you're a terrible person, and leaves, which is quite interesting, because we kind of see just how much Cameron wants her husband back. The idea that she thinks that she's seeing this couple in this tough situation, but she's saying, I know what losing someone's like, and I would forgive them for anything. But there's also an element of hypocrisy there, because Cameron was never facing that problem.
Yeah.
And I find, like, Cameron just seems, I mean, it's an extra element to Cameron that she can feel bitterness like that, but there's kind of a bit of hypocrisy, because Cameron lost her husband, that's true, but Cameron didn't lose her husband while he was then openly having an affair with someone. We don't know if Cameron would have been as forgiving in that situation, which is an element of Cameron which is explored later, and we'll pick it up as it goes.
Yeah,
But
it's hypocrisy, because she's telling the patient what they must do.
Yeah.
And saying, well, yeah, you've got to forgive her now she's alive and, she's been cured, even if the implication is that she's been cheating. And he says, well, no, actually, I don't have to. And to judge someone for that, yeah, that is pretty nasty and actually quite manipulative. Well, an attempt at manipulation, because of what she wants and what she thinks the situation warrants, given her experiences. And she thinks, oh, because I would give anything to be back with my husband, blah, blah, blah. Not to say blah, blah, blah is, I wouldn't do this in real life and say blah, 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 by the way, about something as grave as this. She feels like they need to get back together because of that. But she misses the point that the disease is a consequence of the infidelity.
Yeah, it's that's a very good point. Like the reason, yeah, as you say, the reason they're there is because there were problems in the marriage and she broke his trust. They're not just there by happenstance and oh, it's no one's fault.
Yeah.
Because for all know, he could have African sleeping sickness because of it, which is a terrible thing to do to someone. She also, I do know, like skipping ahead, I know there's a quite a funny line from House at one point where he questions Cameron's marriage, um, saying, "Well, you weren't really married. You didn't really have to face any problems because you knew the marriage would be over in 6 months," which isn't in this episode. But I think that's certainly something that's expanded on. Like Cameron isn't just like calling someone a jerk and it being like, oh, she's fully in the right. That kind of hypocrisy that her marriage, because she married a terminally ill person, comes with extra bells and whistles, which makes it not quite as simple. She can't just judge normal relationships because hers was an incredibly abnormal relationship given the circumstances. And it's not a one size fits all where she can just critique other people's lives, which is nice. I like that they call awareness to like hypocrisies or like sort of nasty character traits that are set up in previous episodes.
But it says it's kind of manipulativeness. She feels like she has to control patients, and actually humans don't work like that. And House recognizes that. He's not really interested whether they've been unfaithful or not.
Yeah.
He's just interested on where the vector of the disease is in this case. So, like we were talking about in the previous episode, there's this conflict between House engaging with the human side of a case and House engaging with the case as just a problem, devoid of its humanity. He's not really... Everyone's engaging with him and saying, look, you're just annoyed that you have a dim view of human nature, and that's why you're being so pessimistic. And I think they kind of miss the point in this case. He's just trying to solve the problem, and he needs to know what's going on. If people tell him the truth, he can do it better. But if you don't talk to him and tell him anything, then he's just going to have to proceed anyway, in one way or another. It's whether you want the person to get better or not quicker. So, I mean, obliquely he engages the human element because he's interested to know the psychology of why they're lying, or the reasons or the logic behind why they're lying. I think in this episode anyway. But it's a means to solving the case, in my opinion. But you might see things differently. What do you think?
I agree with what you've said. I know that's boring. But no, I think you've hit the nail on the head. That yeah, House is often seen as incredibly crude, but House isn't asking for anything other than just accurate medical information so he can do his job.
Yeah,
like
and
him,
I think sometimes
him finding the puzzle interesting isn't a problem. It's just how he functions to do his job, and he does great things than that job.
Yeah, and I think that's something people the characters seem to miss all the time. They get so caught up in their own neuroses, and this will happen to House. He's not invulnerable to this. But it's just nice to see everyone's looking at the tail is wagging the dog, right? That's how they're conceiving it. They think the human story is the thing that's most important, and actually that's just a way. That's not just an instrument for us to engage with the story, because that's really important. But for House, from House's perspective, it doesn't operate like that at all. He's looking at a problem. He wants to figure it out.
100%. Do you find this is up until now the show has avoided this, but the scene. So after they administer the African sleeping sickness cure, House and Cameron are talking. They get paged, and the wife is having a fever spike, and it's like pretty much said that she might not make it. And the husband goes over to her and begs her to not die when she's in a coma. and then she wakes up from the coma and like touches his head, and then everyone acts like it's all fixed. No
Yeah.
medicine is done. It's like the power of his forgiveness or love fixes her. It's a very strange scene in the context of the show. I don't necessarily have a
Yeah.
problem with it. I just think it's a bit weird.
I think it was more for a symbolic and dramatic effect than for actual like causative effect.
Oh yeah, no, I wasn't watching it thinking, oh no, the show is being all mystical and showing that the
Yeah.
power of love is fixing stuff. I understand why it's
But I
there,
mean,
but
like
it's
tonally, it's a very odd choice.
yeah, because the consequences are so real. Like if the husband had just naturally decided to, he doesn't stay with his wife, which is important, but he doesn't want her to die because there's a moment. The reason why Cameron calls him a jerk is because he says, "I'm not even sure if I want her to get better." And he clearly forgives her on a human level. He's like, "I want you to live, but I don't want to be with you." But there's
Yeah.
that moment which I understand is the focus of the scene, but it's done in a very strange way where it's like, oh, this woman's dying, and then she's all better like 2 minutes later.
Yeah. And I think the operative line, as always, is for this is we all make, as House says, we all make mistakes, and we must pay a price.
Mm.
Got to pay the price for those mistakes. Actions have consequences. You can't have the just so love story kind of ending where, yeah, I just got to do whatever I want, and my husband still loves me because of this traumatic period in our lives, and it's tested us to a new level, and we can get over this. It says, well, no, actually, these have consequences.
Yeah, and that's I mean that's why the ending of this episode's quite bittersweet because
Holy shit!
the
It's his friend.
yeah, the friend is the person she had an affair with because she's asked to tell the hospital team to give us the name of the person you've slept with. So yeah, it turns out it's the friend, which is a nice little twist at the end.
Yeah.
But the ending itself is very bittersweet in that way because I mean it's one of the episodes where the patient survives, but it's not a good it's a good thing, but it's not like a happy thing. It's just a positive outcome
Yeah.
for the team's stats more than anything. But yeah, it's a very I guess in that way it's got a little bit more emotional complexity than other medical procedurals I've seen, and I don't think this is why it's a good episode. Is that like it has that drama thread running through it, and then it doesn't just end with everyone's happy. It's got a bit of a bittersweet element with the we make mistakes and we pay the price, which is actually a bit of a which hints a lot to the kind of ethical grey areas that the show goes into.
Yeah.
In that everyone has like storylines, and those storylines don't always end up in a good place. And as the show goes on, we'll see, even with House, the character himself, especially relating to his leg, this idea that just because you make decisions and things, just because you make mistakes and you fix them doesn't mean that everything works out fine. There's always consequences to every action, which is more complex than most shows of this ilk, like even bother playing around with.
Yeah. It's hard to follow up with that, Harvey. I would say, yeah, it kind of has the air of someone's kind of hammered out all of these ethical dilemmas over a course of years. And it's just like, oh, let's just go with this one. What if blah, blah, blah. But I think, so it has that, I guess my thing is it engages with ethical dilemmas seriously, and it doesn't take shortcuts just so that it can be convenient for the audience. And I think it treats the audience with respect.
Yeah.
And also with a degree of cynicism as well. Like, not the audience doesn't treat the audience with cynicism, but delivers a little bit of cynicism as well about how things actually end up in life.
Well, that's the important thing. The audience is as an audience member, I don't feel like I'm being pandered to. I feel like I'm being respected for spending my time viewing it, which is there aren't a lot of shows like this which I can go back and watch. Like Prison Break, we talked about that earlier. Prison Break is not a show that I can go back and watch because everything's so plot focused that there's not a lot for me to get back from it, but I
Mm.
can watch this and see things and think about things, which is very satisfying as an audience member.
Yeah, no shortcuts.
Yeah.
Not yet, anyway. We might come up to some strange ones in the future. We never know.
There
But
will be 173 episodes. Not all of them will be good.
but I think the big thing that I take away from this episode, notwithstanding the ethical dilemma, is the way that it deals with that ethical dilemma in a very grown-up way, is the fact that we've got another episode that's less a medical procedural format than a whodunit.
Yeah.
But it's a whodunit where you don't know the cause of death, so you don't know what the murder weapon is. So you have to you spend the first 20 minutes trying to figure out what the murder weapon is, and then you spend the rest of the episode trying to figure out who did it. And I think that's really interesting. I really like that element to it. It's like a two-step whodunit rather than you already know in Diagnosis Murder or in any sort of like Midsummer Murder, the person was clubbed with the hammer to the head. They died. Yeah. The murder weapon is already there. But the added layer of complexity with this is that the murder weapon isn't a murder weapon, it's a disease, and the person who did it is the person who cheated. So, and then that feeds into the ethical questions. So there's a little bit more going on than maybe we previously gave it credit for. I like it.
Yeah, it's fair. No, it's I mean, yeah, it's a good bit of human drama, and it's got a little bit extra. It's got more than they needed to give it. I do also like with the bittersweet element that we don't know how the other storylines ended, but we can assume that woman was furious from the clinic at her husband drugging her, and we can assume that Wilson's probably going to cheat on his wife. So it's like, while the other two storylines aren't answered, there's that theme of we make mistakes and we pay the price is like there, and you can read in between the lines how both of those storylines are going to go.
He's only in early stage Wilson's disease at the moment, so we'll wait until he contracts we'll wait until Wilson gets late stage Wilson's disease to see whether this divorce will happen.
Oh my god. I do like as well that House mentions he's had other wives, which is a fantastic way of demonstrating that this isn't the first time this has happened, and yet Wilson is completely confident in his own abilities and his own like moral character. There's more there, and I like that it's being told in like one-off lines, and it doesn't feel forced. I don't feel that House doesn't go, "Do you remember those other wives you had that you cheated on?" He just goes like, "I'm sure you say that about every wife you have," and it's like the little things like that are told very well in the show. I don't feel like it feels like two people who already know the context of the conversation they're having are having a conversation. It doesn't feel like anyone's explaining it. One big thing, I don't know if you've seen Big Hero 6, haven't you?
No, I have not.
Well, hopefully some other people who have seen this have, but that show features two orphans, and one of the orphans says to the other, I think he says, one brother says to the other, what would our parents think? And then the other one says, I don't know, our parents died, remember? And I remember thinking, God, that is a lazy way of telling me that information. And this show doesn't do that, which I thoroughly appreciate.
Ah.
Yeah.
Well, that was a very good little example. I have never seen the movie, so I couldn't comment. But yeah,
that's bad backstory delivery, and it's a problem in a lot of things.
Yes. If you there's the opposite problem with backstory delivery that happens in episode 1 of Star Wars, where it's episode 2, and where they keep discussing of all the fun adventures they've been on in their backstory. You think, why didn't you just film them? They would have been infinitely more interesting than the Clone Wars that we're about to see.
Yeah, I mean, it's an issue that's rife within everything, and it's in a way it's not hard to get past if you care enough.
Yeah.
But so many shows do it, and I've never written for televised like television, so maybe it is harder to do than it appears. But it's nice that the showrunners are spotting it.
Yeah.
And not falling into those traps, which is nice. So, well, I would ask us usually for a summation, but it kind of feels like we've been, because this episode's quite simple. I feel like we've been summing it up since we first opened our mouths.
Yeah.
So
I think we evaluated it pretty well.
pat ourselves on the back.
Yeah.
But yeah. So yeah, I feel like we've the whole episode has been us summing it up. So summed up.
Yeah.
I think
Fantastic.
as far as I'm aware, we both enjoyed it. We don't have any contrarian opinions between ourselves, unfortunately. I think we pretty much agree with what we said because there wasn't a lot here.
It's less simple in some ways, a little bit more complex in others, so it's much more down to earth than Socratic method. So it has a lot more kind of chunkier ethical issues to deal with. But quite a solid episode, nothing laughable or crass. I guess the setup was a bit insane. Like the introduction was fairly weak. Oh, I'm so dehydrated. Where are my electrolytes? And so, oh, your wife has been in bed for 3 days and just decided, because she's a considerate person, to just pop to the shop while she's been in bed for 3 days and go back into bed.
Yeah. Who says I'm dehydrated as well?
Yeah, I'm dehydrated. It's like saying, oh, maybe he's going to collapse on the floor or something.
Yes.
I need my electrolytes.
Maybe
So, yeah,
one day
that
we'll
was
go
pretty-
back and I bet if you go back and look at that fridge, he's got some electrolytes in there as well, the lazy bastard.
Oh, I bet. If we
Well,
could... yeah.
so, hey, differential diagnosis. We've differentially diagnosed episode 7, Infidelity from season 1 of House. Next week, we'll be looking at... I should really look at the episode names of House episodes before I do this outro. I can't remember, but hey, there's more episodes of House to come, and that means there's more episodes of Differential Diagnosis to come.
It's called Poison.
Fantastic. We'll see you then.